Hi, I'm a Bullis Student Tutor, and in this video we'll be talking about how to draw any pose with a reference. A lot of the time in movies, shows, or art, etc., we see very complex and dynamic poses, and as artists we might think, wow, that looks really difficult to draw, or I don't even know how I would begin drawing that. So today I'll be talking about how to break down any pose and understand a few key things in a pose. So today I'll be using this reference, and I want to go through my process of how I break down this sort of very dynamic pose and go about starting to draw it. For that, I want to highlight a few key aspects of any pose, which are perspective, anatomy, and direction. Perspective is the angle at which we are seeing the subject, which, when it is distorted, it will affect the anatomy. And the anatomy is the structure of the body, so proportion, size, distance. And finally, there's direction, which is the way the subject's face and body are moving in a given pose. And under this category of direction are two very important things, which are flow or expressiveness, as well as the line of action. So the line of action is essentially the main line of movement or action in a pose. It gives a lot of information about how the body's weight is distributed and how it's moving. A lot of artists use this as a technique to stay loose in the beginning and make sure the movement of the pose is expressed and they aren't being too stiff. So after the line of action, I like to map out a few other things of the body. I like to map out where the limbs are going, so the legs and the arms. I like to map out the torso and the shoulder line and the hip line to just get some very basic information on how the body is positioned in this pose. Lastly, I like to do these things called thumbnail sketches. So it's going to be a rough sketch of this pose, but it's going to combine the ideas that I mentioned earlier of staying loose and mapping things out. So this sketch is going to be on a much smaller scale, very loose, and not going to take a lot of time at all. Building off of that, thumbnail sketches really are just meant to help sort of map out and get an idea of what it's going to be like to draw this pose, and it helps me get an idea of proportions, so the sizing and distance of the different aspects of the body. And I just do this very quick, and I'm not too worried about how it looks because, as I said, it's only here to help me build a stronger idea of what it's going to be like to draw this on a full scale. So to start off, I start off with drawing the head, the shoulder line and torso, as well as the arm. I start with these because they're the most distorted by perspective, and then I go to apply the line of action as well as the direction of the leg, and then I start to just get the rough idea of what the actual legs are going to look like instead of just the movement. I'm not too worried about the arm in the back though because it ends up being covered by the skirt. Here I reference the first sketch I did of this pose, which was more exaggerated, so I'm trying to bring more of that movement back, which is why I'm continuing to adjust the shoulder line and the arm and the legs according to the reference image. Now that I have a rough idea of what the body looks like, I then start looking at things like clothes. The clothes here are important because it covers up her arm in the back, parts of her abdomen, as well as part of her legs. The reason we want to have a good idea of what the body looks like anyways is in case we want to change the clothes. So if the character we're drawing were to be wearing pants, we would then have to know what the arm looked like behind the skirt and be able to draw that. This stage is still a sketch though, so on top of the reference image, I also look at my first sketch to bring back in that exaggeration while trying to stay anatomically correct and loose. After adjusting as much as I could just based off of my eye, I go back in and literally measure the proportions from the reference image to my drawing to make any adjustments I see fit, such as moving the arm down or the leg going up. So I basically repeat this process of measuring and then making changes in my drawing over and over again until until I'm satisfied with this balance between being anatomically correct and expression through the pose. And this balance can look very different in many artists' styles, but I just keep going until I think it looks good. Now that I'm nearing the end of the sketch, I just go back to check the measurement of the reference image with my drawing to see if I'm satisfied. And that is my whole process on how I break down and approach more complex poses. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out other videos on our channel.